But he went to Australia 25 years ago. I never met him.
Poor old Ralph. I'll bet he'd have enjoyed having a pretty niece like you, Miss Smith.
Woodley, please. Leave it to me.
Sure, Bob. I wouldn't interfere for the world.
Now, Miss Smith, your Uncle Ralph was a great friend of ours. I regret to say that he died just a few months ago.
Oh, dear, I'm sorry, Mr. Carruthers.
I'm afraid it ain't what you think, my dear. Old Ralph didn't make no fortune to leave to you.
I had no such thought at all, Mr. Woodley.
One in the eye for me, eh? All right, Bob, carry on.
Well, it's true, Miss Smith, as Mr. Woodley says, your uncle died a poor man. When he heard of your father's death, he begged us, because we'd been such close friends of his, to come to England and hunt you up, to see that you and your mother shouldn't be in any want as his only living relatives.
That was very kind of him, Mr. Carruthers.
Now, I'm a widower, Miss Smith, and I've a little girl of 10.
Yes.
I've taken a house called Chiltern Grange near Farnham while I'm in England. How would you like a job as governess and music teacher?
Oh,
I could offer £100 a year.
£100? But that's splendid pay, Mr. Carruthers.
It's for poor old Ralph's sake. But I'm sure that you'll be worth it, Miss Smith.
You bet she would. Well, what do you say, Miss Smith? Do you take the job? I reckon that you couldn't do much better.
So I thought it over, Mr. Holmes, and I took the job.
And all went well, Miss Smith?
Oh, at first, wonderfully, Dr. Watson. Mr. Carruthers was very nice, and the little girl was a dear. We used to have some charming musical evenings together.
Ah, yes, I'm sure you did, Miss Smith.
Do sit down, Watson. Then why have you come to consult us, Miss Smith?
Well, to begin with, there was Mr. Woodley. He came to Farnham on a visit, and he was quite dreadful. He tried to make love to me. I simply hated him.
Did Mr. Carruthers know?
Oh, yes. Mr. Woodley even proposed to me one day. He said that if I married him, I could have the finest diamonds in London. Imagine. And when I refused, he seized me in his arms. He was very strong.
A scoundrel.
And when I called for help, Mr. Carruthers came in and there was a fight. Oh, it was terrible, Dr. Watson.
Well, at least it was the end of Woodley's visits, I suppose.
Oh, yes. Mr. Carruthers was most upset. He sent Mr. Woodley away, and I haven't seen him since.
I should think not, indeed.
Do calm yourself, my dear Watson. Now, my dear Miss Smith, pray continue.
It is all so strange, you see. It's the cyclist.
The cyclist?
Yes. When I went to Chiltern Grange, Mr. Carruthers said I could spend every weekend in London to see my mother. So every Saturday forenoon I cycle into Farnham to get the 12:22. It's a very lonely road over Charlington Heath, you know.
Oh, yes, I seem to remember it. Mainly woods, if I recollect.
Yes, on one side, and then there's one old house on the other, Charlington Hall. But that's the only one for miles and miles. You hardly ever meet anything, not so much as a cart. But one day...
Yes, Miss Smith?
Well, I happened to look back over my shoulder, Dr. Watson, and about 200 yards behind me I saw a man, also on a bicycle.
What did he look like?
Well, middle-aged, I'd say, and with a dark beard. I looked back again before I reached Farnham, but he'd gone by then, and I didn't think any more about it. But except that...
Except?
When I came back on Monday, I saw him again, on the same stretch of road, and then again the next Saturday, and the next Monday, too.
Aha.
Yes, the case certainly begins to present some features of interest, Watson. Don't you think so?
Did he molest you in any way, Miss Smith?
No. He kept his exact distance, about 200 yards, I'd say, just at the point where the road passes Charlington Hall.
Who lives there, by the way? Do you happen to know, Miss Smith?
I'm afraid I don't.
You mentioned the matter to Mr. Carruthers, of course.
Oh, yes, and he seemed most interested. He said that he'd order a pony cart and groom so that in future I shouldn't have to pass over those lonely roads without some companion.
And you're sure you didn't know this man on the bicycle?
Oh, no, Dr. Watson. He was always just a little too far away for me to see him clearly, but I'm certain it wasn't anyone I knew. And then, this very morning, I thought I'd set a trap for him. The pony cart was to have come this week, but it didn't arrive in time, so I had to cycle again. And there he was, as usual, following me. So I slowed down, and he slowed down, and I stopped altogether.
And he stopped.
Brilliant, my dear Watson.
And then I pedalled on again and laid my trap. There's a little side road through the woods at one point, so I turned into it very quickly. He couldn't have seen me because there's a bend in the road just there. I expected him to shoot past me so that I could have a closer glimpse of him.
But he didn't.
No, Mr. Holmes, he didn't. And when I came out again and looked back...